What's up, you guys? Mike from the future here. If you guys do notice this video, it might start a little abruptly. It's because I seem to have misplaced the beginning part to this video. I don't really know exactly what happened, but it took me until editing to notice that the beginning part was gone. Don't know what happened, but I do apologize. Oh, the story is very interesting. I'm gonna come off a little bit crazy in it, it might sound like, but it is all true and authentic. Once again, believe what you want to believe, but this is my first-hand account of we'll call it my haunted childhood. So if you guys do enjoy this video, please be sure to give a like, share with your friends, and please do subscribe. Alright, on to the video. This all started roughly when I was around the age of 3. The first time I ever experienced anything paranormally was this one night, and the house I lived in, there weren't a lot of rooms, so I always slept in bed with my brother and sister. And then I remember there was this one night, and I was in bed, and the bedroom that we were in, it overlooked into the dining room, and where it looked out into was this little closet tucked away inside the dining room area. And for whatever reason, I just remembered that my eyes were like affixed out to the dining room. I don't know why, but it's so weird to like call back and say like why. I just stared blankly out into the dining room. But anyway, I remember staring out there, and then I remember seeing this little shadow walk from one end of the doorway, passing out, crossing the closet area, and then stopped. And I can make out perfectly like what the shadow looked like. It looked as if it was like a little girl, roughly maybe I would say like 5 or 6. Like the shadow was small. Could make out the kind of hair she had. It looked like curly hair, and she was wearing a dress. And I remember her. She was, so where the dining room was, the bedroom, she was heading into the parlor, which was right next to the dining room. I remember her. She looked at me, and then went like this. And I was 3 years old. I didn't really know anything at the time, and the whole experience was overall scary to me. So I ended up screaming at the top of my lungs, which woke up my brother and sister. And then this started the ever-long trend of every time I saw something weird or experienced anything weird, it was going to be disregarded as I was dreaming and I was having a nightmare. So, fast forward a few years later, I remember seeing a few other shadows throughout the house. One really bothered me that I saw, and this one was arguably the scariest one I've ever seen. It was this tall, and like, I just want to make it clear, like, none of these things like ever like did anything like physical to me, but just seeing them was like terrifying. But I remember seeing this one shadow, and it was tall, like, give it like, I'd say a good 8 to 9 feet tall. and it almost seemed like it had a hunch. And how it was walking, it was weird. It walked very slow. It seemed like it had its hands up like this, like when it walked. And it had very long fingers. And I know how this sounds. This sounds completely cliche. And anybody can believe whatever they want with this. This is... But, I mean... I can recall this verbatim. I can even give you the time. That shadow I saw was roughly around 4 to 4:30 in the morning. And then this also started the other trend of me waking up at very weird hours of the night. So while I saw these shadows, and it was kind of disturbing to witness as a child, it was very... trying to think of the word to say it. It was very, discomforting to say it, that it only got worse as I got older. So, one of the worst times, I would say, that I've ever had living at this house, not the one that I'm currently living in, I should honestly say that from the beginning. I don't want to give the exact address, because I don't want, the people there now to feel uncomfortable, but it was a house off of the Bedford Street area in Fall River, Massachusetts. There was this one night, I must have been 7 or 8 years old, and this is funny too, because this goes back, and like I can confidently say at this point now, because all the other times people would tell me, like, you had a bad dream, it's alright, it's over, you just had a bad dream. And I'm kind of convincing myself at that age, maybe I am just having a bad dream. Maybe it is, something that, I have an overactive imagination. Maybe I am having a bad dream. Well, this one night, I went to bed, and I never slept alone. This is going to be a little bit embarrassing, but at that age, I still slept with my grandmother, and I was just overall terrified to just sleep alone in that house. And I went to bed, and I remember, I can't even say specifically, and it's kind of funny, the dream that I had that night too. I had a dream that I don't know if I was playing it or I was it, but I used to love this one specific 007 game when I was a kid. I think it was Nightfire. And I was either playing it from that perspective or I was James Bond. It's so weird. But I woke up and I remember it was late. And I don't want to sound, like I said, I don't want to sound too cliche. It was always around this time. It was around 2:30, 3 in the morning. It was always around that time. And I remembered when I woke up, it was dead quiet, which, normal. Usually I had the TV on in the room, but my grandmother was, if she woke up and I was asleep, she would turn the TV off. So TV was off, dead silent. Out from the dining room, I could see the doors cracked a little bit. There's no light on, everything's pitch black. And I could hear whispering. And it sounded it was very weird. It almost sounded like somebody was saying, "Give me the knife." Like repeatedly. And then I heard what sounded like shh, like that, like I don't know if whoever it was knew I was listening. I was terrified at this point. It went dead quiet for about 2 minutes. I'm literally getting chills just saying this because I laugh about it now, but at the time this was like the scariest thing. It was dead quiet, and then out of nowhere I heard a scream come from the left side of my ear. So this was on the opposite side where my grandmother was sleeping. This was on my left side, and I just heard a loud scream. And at first I thought it was my grandmother, so at first I started screaming too. And then I looked, she was fast asleep. As soon as I started screaming, she woke up. She was all confused. She had no idea what was going on. And as soon as she woke up, the scream I heard, it stopped. I started crying. I was scared out of my mind as to what the hell just happened. My brother and my mom were sleeping on the first floor, came up to the second floor where my grandmother and I were sleeping, and they came up and they're just like, what the hell is going on? So I'm trying to explain to them that I heard a scream. I know I was not asleep. I know what I heard was real. I could recall the dream I was in. This was not sleep paralysis. I was moving. I was awake for at least a good 30 minutes hearing these whispers and the scream. No one believed me. And that was the most frustrating moment of my life, just trying to convince everybody there is something wrong with the house that we're in. There's something not right with this house. My grandmother, she thought I was just dreaming. She thought that because my sister was into weird stuff like metal music, like death metal music, like Cradle of Filth and stuff like that. And she thought that maybe, I used to hang out with my sister a lot. She thought maybe that my sister was scaring me and it was causing my mind to overreact at night. And that wasn't the case either. Because it was something completely different. There was nothing that anybody could have done that would have influenced what I experienced. It wasn't until I was around, I was in the 5th grade, so I think I was roughly 10 or 11 years old, where I started getting into books on the paranormal. Because now I'm going down a rabbit hole. I'm trying to figure out why this is happening, what this is, why it's doing what it's doing, and if it's going to harm me. I had no clue how far this was going to go. So, me as a kid, I got books, I read on it, and I might have freaked myself out a little bit more just reading about some of these things, but I found it very intriguing that there were, and somewhat comforting, that there were other people who had similar experiences to what I had. I found out that the things that I was seeing were known as the shadow people, and from what I've read is they could be malicious, but for me they've never really done anything particular to harm me. So I took it as they were there, they wanted to make their presence known, but so long as I didn't bother with them, they wouldn't bother with me. After that, I kind of just kept pushing everything aside. I set my bedtimes to a very specific regimen. I did not want to be up past midnight. So pretty much my adult swim days were over, if that was even a thing when school started, because I could not even stay up past 12, even if I tried to. But during the summer I would try. Those were over. The midnight summer days were over. And there were even times I've had friends sleep over my house. And they even told me the same things, when they would sleep over, this house is very, very weird. And these were kids who were in elementary school with me. And I would never tell them the house was haunted. I would never even say anything like that, because I didn't want anybody thinking I was nuts. They would come over and they would say the same thing. This house is weird. Going back onto the topic of the shadow people that I've experienced, there was this one time, I will never ever forget this, and I don't know, and this kind of goes back to my whole theory on that the shadow people aren't they can be, some, I feel like some can be evil, but some can be good at the same time. Yeah, I don't know if they're angels and demons, like, I don't know. Those, like, to use that terminology, I do not know. But what I do know is when I was 14 to 15 years old, I lost my great uncle. I used to spend so much time with him. When my mom would go out and do chores, I would grab board games, and it was kind of awesome because he lived right next door to my mom and my grandmother. So my mom went out, did chores for the day. I would go over there. I'd bring my board games. We played board games, and most of the time he'd let me win. And he was just overall, he was like a really nice guy. He was a great guy. So losing him when I was 14 and 15 years old, it did hit pretty tough to just have that person just gone out of my life at that point. Roughly a year later, I was not thinking of him in the slightest. Not for a minute. Went to bed, and I'm gonna call it a dream, but do not even take this as a dream, because I am so convinced that this was not even a dream. I had this dream where I was walking in this big, it was a room, but it looked like it was like a nursing home, where I was in this room, everything was white. Even the clothes that these people were wearing were white. I couldn't recall any of the people that I was looking at, but they all seemed happy. Every single one of them, they were all old. It felt like it was almost like a nursing home that I was in. And it was bright, it was very like dreamy too, if you will. Like the whole landscape and the environment was like this dreamy, happy, surreal place. And I remember I was walking around like I was supposed to find somebody there, and I saw my great uncle. And when I saw him, he didn't look upset, but it looked like he was almost like just sitting there like waiting for something or someone. And he saw me, and I remember in the dream I started crying, and I was like, oh my god. And he looked at me, he never spoke, but he just went like that, like, I'm okay, don't cry, I'm okay. And he went like that, told me how, like, come have a seat next to me. So I went next to him, and we just both looked at each other. It was very fast. And I remembered how it ended was he always used to do this with me. Every time when we were done hanging out for the day, he'd always reach over and shake my hand. And I remembered in the dream, he reached over, shook my hand, and the dream was over. What made this very unlike any other dream I've ever had was I had, it's not all five, but I had all four senses. I could smell his old cologne. I saw him. I heard all the people. I didn't hear him. And when we shook hands one more time, I could feel that skin-on-skin contact. And I've never felt that. I've never felt that ever again. And I just remembered I woke up and I looked, like I was like waking up, I was like, that was a wild dream. And I remember I woke up, I looked to my right, and then there was this big black shadow figure just standing right next to my bed. And it literally looked like somebody was in like a black morph suit. Like, that's the best way I can make it out. It wasn't like a cloud, it wasn't on the wall, it was just standing there. It was like looking at me, like almost like it took me to go see him one more time. I know how that sounds nuts, but I don't know. I don't even know how to explain that to this day. And after that, it's just, I've never had any, like, other wild experiences like that. I've had little things like where I've looked into, like with my old family home up in New Hampshire, and I've had like weird experiences with that. But other than that, like with things that have happened in my childhood home, I've never had anything as crazy as that. It wasn't until I was much older where most of the stories that I would tell my mom when I was a kid, and she would roll them off as, yeah, dreaming, it was a nightmare. It wasn't until I was older where I started getting validation for the experiences I had. So when I saw that little girl shadow figure, my mom told me, she's like, when I was a music teacher in my late 20s, early 30s, I had this one student that had curly hair, and she died, but she was riding her tricycle, and a car, she wasn't looking, went into the road, a car came, and it killed her. My mom went to her funeral, and the girl's family loved my mom, and that little girl loved my mom. They just had a great relationship. So as a parting gift, the girl's family gave my mom a stuffed animal. It was one of our favorite stuffed animals. My mom didn't want to turn it down, so she took it. She remembered that night she was in bed, and it was the same exact thing. She saw the little girl, but she actually saw her. It wasn't a shadow. She saw facial features and everything. Go by the door, look at my mom, go like that, and then keep walking. And once I heard that, I was like blown away. Like, this makes sense. The house was genuinely haunted. And there was other times too that I've talked to my mom, like, do you remember the time when I woke up in the middle of the night screaming? And she said, yeah. She's like, and I thought I heard something prior to me waking up. She's like, but I assumed that was you screaming. And I told her, I was like, I heard another scream. And she told me that, it's a busy city we live in. Maybe you heard somebody screaming outside. And I said, no, where I heard it was in the room I was in. I would be able to tell the difference between outside and in the room I was in. It was definitely in the room I was in. And other than that, the only other person who's had an experience once I've left the house was my sister. And her story was just, I think once my sister experienced what she experienced, it was like, that was like the coffin nail. Like, now everybody knows I'm not crazy. There was something up with this house. I don't know why it was haunted, but it was extremely haunted. My sister heard somebody walking up the stairs. She lived on the third floor. She rented it out, and there was nobody on the second. There was nobody on the first at this point. This was maybe like 4 years ago now. And there was nobody on the first or second floor. They were being renovated. She was the only one in this building now. She was on the third floor apartment, and her husband was working late. He was working TSA in Boston. And she remembered hearing the door open up on the first floor, and she was hearing banging. So at first she thought maybe my brother came in to do work on the first floor since it was being renovated. She goes down, looks in, all the lights are off. It's pitch black. No one's there. So she's a little bit creeped out now. Goes back up to the third, and she hears boot steps coming into the hallway. So now she's thinking, it's my husband. She calls out to her husband. No response. She goes back into her apartment. She has 2 dogs. Her dogs are now growling at the door. And she hears these boot steps come running up the stairs. And from what I was told, they're running up and running down, up and down, up and down, up and down. And it was like non-stop. And she was freaked out. From what I was told, she was crying. I was asleep through this whole thing. I'm pretty sure I was already where I'm at right now, living in my house. Or I was just starting to live here. Either that or I was at Mackenzie's grandmother's house, sleeping there for the night. And she's hearing all this. She's freaking out. She doesn't know what to do. She's all alone. It's 12 or 1 in the morning. So she calls my mom. She's on the phone with my mom. She said she doesn't know what is going on, but my mom needs to get there right now. She's scared out of her mind, and that's all she could get out. Her phone ended up dying, and it was plugged in prior to all this, and the battery just done, dead. So she managed to get to work once my mom got there, and they both went up to the 3rd floor apartment, and my mom waited until her husband got home, and my sister is the only one that lives there now. Other people rent out the 1st and 2nd floor, and from what my sister has told me, they have also reported weird things in the house, and the last thing I heard was a priest was coming to bless the house. Not that it was demonic in nature, but whatever was there definitely didn't come off as a good spirit or anything with good energy or good intents. Overall, I would say my childhood with all those experiences with just that house alone, I would say that's what drove me into the paranormal, and like reading about certain things and just hearing how certain stories matched up, and then also investigating, like looking into how, like what could be paranormal, what could be debunked as paranormal. And it's one of those things, like, to hear it coming from me, it sounds nuts. And I will agree, it sounds very crazy. But it was all legit. It all happened. I have nothing to lie about. And it was just an overall crazy experience that happened when I was younger. If you guys do enjoy this video, please be sure to give it a like, share, and subscribe. Since this video was a little bit more personal in nature, if you guys do have any comments or questions to ask, feel free to down in the comment section below. I love responding back to any of the comments you guys leave. And overall, I love having the channel be a source of, like, a forum just to talk about these certain things. With that being said, thank you for watching. Have a good night.